U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Iraq's new parliament must get to work by July the 1st. The United States believes a unified Iraqi government will be able to defeat Sunni rebel fighters. Many analysts blame Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's policies for fueling the Sunni unrest. The American architect of Iraq's transition says things got worse when the United States withdrew. Fergus Nicholl sat down with Paul Bremer.
May 2003. Paul Bremer is appointed to lead Iraq's first post-Saddam administration. He ruled by executive order, and his first two edicts have had lasting consequences. The first banned the ruling Ba'ath Party. The second disbanded the entire Iraqi army. Anyone involved in the country's two biggest institutions were out of work at a stroke. Today, as the new Iraqi army struggles to contain the latest post-Saddam rebellion, he defends those decisions, pinning the blame on today's political leadership.
The army that was then built by the with American training was an effective army. That army defeated al-Qaeda in Iraq by the end of 2008 or 2009. The next question is, well, why did it collapse in Mosul and Tikrit? And I think the answer largely goes to the fact that as part of his efforts to create a more authoritarian government, Nouri al-Maliki, after our troops left in 2011, basically started purging many of those trained officers, even down to the battalion level in the Iraqi army. And by the way, he did the same thing with the Iraqi intelligence service, which we had built up also starting in 2003 and 2004. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
The high point of Bremer's 14-month leadership was the capture of Saddam Hussein. The man who'd ruled Iraq with a ruthless hand for 24 years was convicted by an Iraqi special tribunal of mass murder and hanged. And Ambassador Bremer insists that Iraq is still a better place now than it was pre-2003.
I'm not here to make the case for Nouri al-Maliki. I'm simply saying, despite his flaws, he is no Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's Iraq was stable, but it was basically a terror house. So I will continue to say and believe that the Iraqis are better off today. We'll see how the situation develops than they were under Saddam.
After leaving Iraq, Bremer won presidential praise, but also criticism over the way billions of dollars of Iraqi and US money was spent in the aftermath of the invasion. He still thinks the US shouldn't have pulled out.
Well, I think the withdrawal was a mistake. I said so at the time, and unfortunately, in this case, I was right. What happened was Nouri al-Maliki took it as a signal of disinterest by America and giving him a freer range to establish a much more authoritarian, sectarian government.
The Obama administration has so far only committed itself to sending several hundred military advisors, and the Iraqi army is proving itself unable to cope under rebel attack on so many fronts. Fergus Nicholl, Al Jazeera.
Despite what Paul Bremer said, political divides in Iraq existed long before 2011. The Bush administration was only able to set up Iraq's government in 2006 by bringing Kurds and Shias together. Neither group trusts Sunni Arabs to guarantee an autonomous Kurdistan or to keep the peace. Secretary Kerry hopes political leaders will form an inclusive government this time, but he appears to be using parts of the same playbook. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Fazil Itani. He's a resident fellow with the Atlantic Council. Mr. Itani, do you believe that a unified, united government could be set up in just a week?
I believe that a cabinet can be formed, whether or not it is accurately representative of a broad spectrum of the Iraqi population, including Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. That's a much more difficult undertaking, particularly in these security circumstances.
And even if it does form that cabinet, is that enough to get the rebel fighters to say, okay, it looks like they're forming a unified government, we'll stop our advance towards Baghdad?
Well, look, I mean, the opposition is multifaceted. There are elements of it, obviously the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, that is not interested in any sort of political compromise with Baghdad. It's interested in destroying the modern Iraqi state and replacing it with a caliphate. However, there are important elements of the opposition without whom ISIS would not have been able to make this progress, and this includes tribal elements, more moderate or mainstream Sunni insurgents, ex-Baathists and Baathists and what have you. It's they who al-Maliki has an interest in reaching out to if he wants to stabilize the situation.
And do you see him reaching out right now and taking the steps necessary to try to stabilize things?
Perhaps superficially, but I don't think he's temperamentally capable or able at the moment, especially given the role Iran is playing in the country, to take such kind of bold steps towards a deeper reconciliation with the Sunni population. I don't think he's the man to do it.
So you're in the camp that that he must go. Who should replace him, and is there a viable leader who could step up and make this happen?
Well, there's any number of Iraqi politicians, not all of whom have deeply alienated the mainstream Sunni population, of course. The problem is this person has to enjoy not just enough Sunni support, or at least Sunni passivity and tolerance. He also has to have Iran's endorsement, as well as the endorsement of most of the Shia parties in the country and the Kurds, and that's what makes the choice so difficult.
And you don't see any one of these potential alternates having all of that?
No, I think they exist, but I think it's a question of incentivizing all the important players and having them see that is in their interest to resolve this conflict. I mean, I think there are significant subsections of the Iraqi population, as well as of the elites, that think this war is worth fighting for now, and they're doubling down.
Faisal, how do you see this playing out over the next couple of weeks?
I think there's going to be a very long and tortuous political negotiation process. On the military front, I anticipate that ISIS's advance will slow down around Baghdad. They're not capable of taking the capital city, nor is that their intention at the moment, at least, or proceeding south. They can hold predominantly Sunni territory, but once they start going into non-Sunni territory, things get a lot more difficult for them. I anticipate there's going to be some sort of deadlock around the surroundings of Baghdad, north and west of the capital.
Faisal Litani is a resident fellow with the Atlantic Council. Faisal, thanks for joining us.